This is a powerful story about dignity, respect, and the true measure of character. Naomi Carter is a hard-working maid working at the lavish Chicago wedding of a powerful mafia boss, Vincent Romano, and his arrogant bride, Olivia Sinclair. Naomi desperately needs this job to pay for her sick mother's hospital bills, so she endures it when Olivia intentionally spills wine on her uniform and publicly humiliates her in front of the elite guests. The climax occurs when Naomi kindly helps Vincent's young niece with a broken shoe. Angered by Naomi's grace, Olivia drops tip money on the floor and orders Naomi to pick it up, but Naomi calmly refuses, choosing to protect her dignity. Vincent, who has been quietly observing everything from a balcony, finally steps in. He reveals that his own mother was once a maid, and that Naomi had stayed up all night caring for his sick mother while Olivia was busy posting photos online. Disgusted by Olivia's cruelty towards those she views as beneath her, Vincent publicly calls off the wedding and broadcasts security footage of Olivia abusing the staff to all the guests. And the story ends with how Naomi leaves the mansion. Please enjoy. The cruelest people always smile the brightest when they think no one powerful is watching. Naomi Carter's hand trembled as she balanced the crystal champagne tray against her shoulder, weaving carefully through a ballroom that looked more like a royal palace than a wedding venue in downtown Chicago. Golden chandeliers spilled warm light across marble floors, polished so perfectly they reflected every diamond, every designer heel, every forced smile hiding behind expensive champagne glasses. The Romano wedding was already being called the social event of the year. Politicians stood beside celebrity attorneys, luxury cameras flashed every few seconds, men in tailored black suits guarded every entrance with silent vigilance. And somewhere above them all, Vincent Romano watched from the second-floor balcony like a king observing his empire. Naomi kept her eyes lowered, the way the head housekeeper had taught her. Invisible people survived longer in places like this. She moved quietly between tables, replacing empty glasses while guests laughed loudly about private jets, vacation homes in Italy, and $100,000 watches. None of them noticed the tiny cut across Naomi's palm where a broken wine glass had sliced her skin an hour earlier in the kitchen. She'd wrapped it tightly in a white napkin and kept working because people like her did not stop bleeding until the rich stopped celebrating. Careful with that tray, another server whispered as Naomi approached the center ballroom staircase. Olivia's already in a mood. Naomi nodded softly. Everyone in the mansion feared Olivia Sinclair. In less than an hour, she would officially become Olivia Romano, wife of the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. But Naomi had learned something during her 3 weeks working inside the Romano estate. Expensive smiles often hid ugly hearts. The orchestra suddenly quieted as Olivia descended the staircase in a custom white gown covered in hand-sewn crystals that glittered beneath the chandelier light like frozen diamonds. Guests turned immediately, phones lifting into the air to capture her entrance. Olivia smiled perfectly for the cameras, but her blue eyes scanned the room with cold irritation until they landed on Naomi. "You." Olivia snapped sharply, extending her empty champagne glass. Naomi stepped forward quickly, lowering the tray with both hands, despite the sting shooting through her injured palm. "Yes, ma'am." Olivia took a slow sip, then looked down at Naomi's black uniform with visible disgust. "Honestly, who approved this staff dress code? The ballroom looks like a funeral." Several guests chuckled quietly. Naomi remained still. "I'm sorry, ma'am, and stop apologizing every 5 seconds." Olivia replied loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "It's embarrassing." More laughter followed. Naomi lowered her eyes further, praying the moment would end. But humiliation had become entertainment now. Olivia tilted her head slightly, studying Naomi the way wealthy people examined things they considered beneath them. Then, with one careless flick of her wrist, she spilled dark red champagne directly across Naomi's uniform. The cold liquid soaked through instantly. Crystal gasps echoed around the ballroom before Olivia laughed softly and lifted both hands in fake innocence. "Oh my God," she said dramatically. "Look what you did." Phones immediately turned toward Naomi. Someone near the dance floor actually laughed out loud. Naomi froze, her cheeks burning as red wine dripped slowly from her sleeves onto the white marble floor. "Well?" Olivia said impatiently. "Clean it up." Naomi slowly knelt beside the bride's expensive heels, using the same white cloth wrapped around her injured hand to wipe the spreading stain from the floor before it reached the train of Olivia's gown. But as she pressed the cloth against the marble, the cut on her palm reopened beneath the pressure. A single drop of blood mixed with the spilled champagne beside Olivia's white wedding dress. The ballroom laughter grew louder, and high above them, Vincent Romano finally stopped smiling. Naomi kept her head lowered as she carried the stained tray back toward the service hallway, but she could still feel hundreds of eyes following her across the ballroom like cold needles against her skin. Behind her, the orchestra resumed playing soft violin music as if nothing humiliating had just happened. The wealthy guests returned to their champagne and laughter with frightening ease. For them, the moment had already become another amusing story to tell over expensive dinners. But for Naomi, humiliation had weight. It sat heavy in her chest, while red wine dried against her sleeves and the cut in her palm continued throbbing beneath the cloth. The moment she pushed through the kitchen doors, the noise of the ballroom faded behind stainless steel counters, steaming trays, and nervous whispers from the staff. "Are you okay?" one of the younger servers asked quietly. Naomi forced a small nod, even though her throat burned with embarrassment. "I am fine." But she was not fine. 3 weeks earlier, Naomi Carter had arrived at the Romano estate with one suitcase, $83 in her bank account, and a phone filled with unpaid hospital notifications for her mother back in Detroit. The Romano family paid more in 1 week than Naomi made in a month cleaning office buildings. She told herself she could survive anything for 6 months if it meant keeping her mother's oxygen treatments covered. Even this. She walked toward the sink station and carefully rinsed the wine from her sleeves while cooks rushed around preparing the 7-tier wedding cake for presentation. No one noticed her shaking hands except Mrs. Delgado, the head housekeeper. The older woman approached quietly beside her. "Do not let Olivia break your spirit," she whispered while handing Naomi a clean towel. "Girls like her think cruelty makes them look powerful." Naomi gave a tired smile. "I just need this job." Mrs. Delgado's expression softened for a moment before another kitchen worker rushed in breathlessly. "Mrs. Romano Sr. is asking for Naomi again upstairs." Naomi immediately straightened. "Now, right now." Naomi quickly dried her hands and headed toward the private elevator reserved for family floors. Unlike the ballroom downstairs, filled with diamonds and cameras, the upper level of the Romano mansion remained quiet and dimly lit. Thick carpets softened every footstep. Family portraits lined the walls beside antique lamps glowing gold against dark wood paneling. It felt less like a mansion and more like a museum built around old secrets. Naomi stepped carefully into Eleanor Romano's bedroom and found Vincent's mother resting against silk pillows near the window overlooking Lake Michigan. At 72, Eleanor looked fragile beneath the cream-colored blanket draped across her lap. But her sharp grey eyes still carried the unmistakable authority of a woman who had once ruled beside powerful men. "There you are," Eleanor said softly when Naomi entered. "I wondered where my favorite girl disappeared to." Naomi smiled gently, despite the pain still lingering in her chest. "I was helping downstairs." Eleanor noticed the wine stains immediately. Her expression darkened. "Olivia did that." Naomi hesitated for half a second too long. Eleanor sighed heavily. "That girl thinks kindness is weakness." Naomi quietly adjusted the older woman's medication tray beside the bed. "You should rest before the ceremony begins." Eleanor studied Naomi carefully. You stayed with me all night yesterday during my chest pains, and you never told Vincent. Naomi lowered her eyes again. I did not want to ruin the wedding. The older woman looked suddenly emotional. Most people in this house obey because they fear my son. You helped me because you are kind. Naomi said nothing. Downstairs, faint music drifted upward through the mansion floors while guests celebrated beneath crystal lights. But neither woman noticed the security monitor glowing silently in the corner of the bedroom. Because on the screen, Vincent Romano stood alone in the dark balcony overlooking the ballroom below, replaying the footage of Naomi kneeling on the marble floor again and again without saying a single word. Power does not reveal who people are when everything is easy. It reveals them when someone weaker is standing in front of them. Vincent Romano stood motionless in the dim security room while dozens of camera screens flickered across the wall before him. The ballroom below glowed like a golden dream filled with crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and smiling faces pretending to admire one another. But Vincent was no longer watching the wedding. He was watching Naomi Carter, again and again. The footage replayed silently on the largest monitor. Naomi kneeling beside Olivia's dress, wine soaking through her black sleeves, her injured hand trembling against the marble floor while guests laughed around her. Most people would have defended themselves. Most people would have cried, argued, or stormed away in humiliation. Naomi had done none of those things. She simply cleaned the mess while trying not to embarrass anyone further. Vincent slowly loosened the cufflinks on his black tuxedo shirt without taking his eyes off the screen. Behind him, Luca Moretti, his longtime head of security, shifted uncomfortably. You want me to handle? Olivia Luca finally asked carefully. Vincent remained silent for several seconds. The city feared Vincent Romano because he rarely raised his voice. Men who shouted often wanted attention. Men who stayed calm usually already controlled the room. No, Vincent answered quietly. Not yet. Downstairs, the ballroom atmosphere had grown even louder as reporters and social media influencers continued arriving for the ceremony. Olivia Sinclair loved attention almost as much as she loved expensive things. Giant floral arrangements imported from Italy lined the staircase. A string quartet played beside an ice sculpture shaped like intertwined wedding rings. Every detail had been designed to impress people who already had too much money to care. Naomi returned to the ballroom carrying fresh champagne bottles while trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. She could still feel the dried wine against her skin beneath the replacement jacket Mrs. Delgado had quietly given her upstairs. The younger servers looked at her sympathetically as she passed, but none of them dared speak openly. Staff members inside powerful homes learned quickly that survival depended on silence. Table 12 needs more glasses. A coordinator whispered urgently into Naomi's ear. Naomi nodded and immediately changed direction toward the VIP section where Chicago judges, businessmen, and political donors sat laughing beside men whose names never appeared in newspapers despite controlling half the city behind closed doors. Naomi moved carefully through the crowd until a small voice suddenly stopped her. Miss Naomi. She turned and saw Sophia Romano, Vincent's 8-year-old niece, standing near the dessert table in a pale pink dress with tears gathering in her eyes. My shoe broke, the little girl whispered anxiously while lifting one foot. Naomi immediately set down the tray. Let me see, sweetheart. The tiny strap on Sophia's shoe had snapped loose. Around them, wealthy guests remained too distracted by champagne and gossip to notice the child struggling near the crowded dance floor. Naomi knelt calmly beside her and adjusted the broken strap as best she could. There, she said softly. You are still the prettiest girl in the room. Sophia smiled immediately. Better than Olivia. Naomi nearly laughed despite herself. Do not let the bride hear you say that. Unfortunately, someone else already had. Say what Olivia's sharp voice cut through the music like shattered glass. Naomi slowly stood as Olivia approached with several bridesmaids trailing behind her in glittering dresses. The bride's expression darkened the moment she saw Naomi touching Sophia's shoe. "Why are you still here?" Olivia asked coldly. "I thought someone cleaned you up already." The surrounding conversations began quieting almost instantly. Naomi stepped back respectfully. Sophia needed help with her shoe. "Ma'am." Olivia rolled her eyes dramatically. Of course she did. Then she looked directly at the child. "Sweetheart, do not sit on dirty floors like that. You do not know where those hands have been." The words landed like ice water across the ballroom. Sophia's smile disappeared immediately. Naomi felt her chest tighten, but she kept her expression calm. Across the room, Vincent Romano had just stepped out onto the ballroom balcony above, and for the first time all evening, his eyes did not leave Olivia. Some people humiliate others because deep down, they are terrified someone kinder will be loved more than they are. The ballroom air felt heavier now, thick with uncomfortable silence after Olivia Sinclair's cruel comment about Naomi's hands. Even the violinists seemed uncertain as their music softened into awkward hesitation beneath the towering chandeliers. Sophia Romano quietly stepped closer to Naomi's side, instinctively seeking comfort from the one adult who had treated her gently all evening. Olivia noticed immediately, and her smile tightened. "Sophia?" Olivia said sweetly while kneeling carefully beside the little girl's chair. "Why do you keep following the staff around tonight?" The child looked confused by the question. "Because Miss Naomi is nice to me." Several nearby guests exchanged glances. Olivia's bridesmaids laughed nervously into their champagne glasses, unsure whether they were supposed to find the moment funny or uncomfortable. Olivia slowly stood again, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her crystal-covered gown. "Sweetheart, people are nice because it is their job." The words sounded polished and elegant on the surface, but the coldness underneath them spread across the ballroom like winter air. Naomi remained perfectly still beside the dessert table, her injured hand hidden carefully behind the serving tray. "Actually," Sophia replied innocently, "Miss Naomi stayed with Grandma Eleanor all night yesterday when she could not breathe good." Olivia's expression froze for half a second. It was tiny, almost invisible, but Vincent Romano saw it immediately from the balcony above. The bride quickly recovered her smile. "How touching," she said softly, though her eyes no longer looked warm. "Maybe we should hire her as a nurse too." Quiet laughter spread through a few nearby tables. Naomi lowered her gaze, refusing to react. Olivia stepped closer now, close enough for Naomi to smell expensive perfume mixed with champagne. "Tell me something," Olivia asked loudly enough for surrounding guests to hear. "Do all the staff members tell dramatic stories to impress the family, or are you special?" Naomi blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, you heard me." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "You seem very comfortable getting attention tonight." The ballroom grew quieter again. People pretended not to stare while staring anyway. Wealthy crowds loved cruelty as long as someone else was suffering. Naomi carefully chose her words. "I was only helping Mrs. Romano, and now you are helping my wedding become awkward." Olivia's voice sharpened beneath the smile. Interesting talent. One of the bridesmaids chuckled too loudly. Another guest lifted his phone slightly, pretending to check messages while clearly recording the confrontation. Naomi felt heat crawling into her cheeks again, but she forced herself to remain calm. Losing control in places like this only entertained people more. "I apologize if I offended you." Olivia laughed softly. "There you go, apologizing again." Then she looked around the ballroom dramatically. "Honestly, does anyone else find this exhausting?" More laughter followed, though weaker this time. Uneasy, forced, because something had shifted in the room. The guests were beginning to notice what Vincent Romano had already seen. Naomi never defended herself. She never insulted anyone back. She simply absorbed humiliation quietly while trying not to create problems for others. and somehow that made Olivia appear smaller instead of stronger. Olivia sensed the shift too. That was the dangerous thing about insecure people. They could feel respect leaving a room before anyone said a word. Her smile slowly disappeared. "You know what?" she said suddenly. "Since you clearly love helping so much, why do not you do something useful?" She reached for the thick envelope resting beside the wedding gift table and pulled out several $100 bills meant for tipping the event staff later that evening. Then, with deliberate elegance, Olivia let the money fall across the marble floor at Naomi's feet. The bills scattered beside her black shoes like green confetti beneath the chandelier light. "Go ahead," Olivia said coldly. "Pick it up. That is what girls like you are good at, right?" Nobody laughed this time. The ballroom went completely silent, and above them all, Vincent Romano finally started walking toward the staircase. The most dangerous silence is not fear. It is the moment dignity refuses to kneel. The scattered $100 bills rested across the marble floor beneath the ballroom lights while nobody moved. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Camera phones remained frozen in guests' hands. Even the violinists had stopped playing completely now, their bows hovering uncertainly above the strings. Olivia Sinclair stood in the center of it all, with her arms crossed and a satisfied smile on her face. Waiting for Naomi Carter to obey, waiting for humiliation to become entertainment again. Naomi looked down at the money near her shoes, then slowly lifted her eyes toward Olivia. Her chest tightened painfully, but not because of the insult itself. It was because she suddenly realized every staff member in the ballroom was watching her. Servers stood frozen beside silver trays. Bartenders stopped pouring drinks. Housekeepers near the back entrance held folded linens tightly against their chests. They all understood the moment for what it truly was. This was no longer about money. It was about whether someone with power could force another human being to surrender their dignity publicly. Naomi inhaled slowly and kept her voice calm. "I am sorry if I upset you tonight, ma'am," she said softly. "But I will not do that." Olivia's smile disappeared instantly. "Excuse me." Naomi remained still despite her trembling hands. "I said I will not pick the money up off the floor." A sharp murmur spread across the ballroom. Several guests exchanged shocked looks while others leaned forward eagerly, sensing drama powerful enough to overshadow the wedding itself. Olivia laughed once, but there was no warmth left in it now. Only anger. "You really think you are in a position to refuse me?" Naomi swallowed carefully. "No, ma'am. I just think some things matter more than money." The words landed harder than anyone expected. Olivia's face darkened immediately. Around them, the atmosphere shifted from amusement into discomfort so thick it almost felt visible beneath the golden ballroom lights. Because for the first time all evening, the black maid standing in a stained uniform somehow looked calmer than the bride wearing $500,000 in diamonds. Upstairs, Vincent Romano continued descending the grand staircase one slow step at a time. His polished black shoes echoed softly against the marble, though most guests remained too distracted by the confrontation below to notice him yet. Only Luca Moretti watched carefully from the edge of the ballroom, already recognizing the expression on Vincent's face. It was the same expression Vincent wore before making decisions that permanently changed people's lives. Olivia stepped closer to Naomi again, lowering her voice just enough to sound more threatening than loud. "You should remember where you are." Naomi nodded gently. "I do." "Then act like it." Naomi glanced briefly towards Sophia Romano, who still stood nearby, clutching the side of her pink dress nervously. The little girl looked frightened now. Naomi immediately softened her expression for the child's sake. "Please do not be upset," Naomi whispered kindly towards Sophia. "Everything is okay." Olivia caught the moment instantly, and somehow that kindness only made her angrier. "Unbelievable," she muttered. Then she suddenly turned toward the crowd with a dramatic smile returning to her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, Olivia announced loudly, raising her champagne glass toward the ballroom. Apparently the help tonight has decided she is too proud to do her job. A few uncomfortable laughs followed, but not many this time. Too many people had started noticing Vincent Romano descending the staircase behind her now, slowly, calmly, watching everything. Olivia continued speaking anyway. Unaware of how quiet the ballroom had become behind her, maybe somebody should remind her who pays her salary. Naomi lowered her eyes again, trying desperately not to let the humiliation show on her face. But before Olivia could continue, another voice finally entered the silence. Deep, calm, controlled. I pay her salary. The entire ballroom froze. Olivia's smile collapsed instantly before she even turned around. Because everyone in Chicago recognized Vincent Romano's voice the same way people recognize thunder before a storm. There are moments when an entire room realizes power has changed sides. Vincent Romano's voice rolled across the ballroom with deadly calm, and every sound immediately disappeared beneath it. The guests stopped breathing. The musicians lowered their instruments completely. Even the photographers holding expensive cameras near the stage slowly stepped backward as Vincent descended the final staircase step and entered the center of the room. Olivia Sinclair turned slowly toward him, forcing a smile that no longer looked convincing. "Vincent," she said lightly, laughing once as though the entire scene had been harmless fun. It was just a joke. Vincent did not answer her immediately. His dark eyes moved first toward the scattered bills across the marble floor, then toward Naomi Carter standing quietly beside the dessert table with her injured hand hidden against her side. The wine stain remained visible on her sleeve beneath the ballroom lights. Vincent noticed everything. The silence stretched painfully long. Olivia shifted uncomfortably beneath it. "You are embarrassing me in front of everyone," she whispered carefully. Vincent finally looked at her. "No," he replied softly. "You did that yourself." The words landed across the ballroom like cold steel. Several guests lowered their eyes instantly. Others stared openly, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Nobody had ever seen Vincent Romano publicly contradict Olivia before. Olivia's face tightened, though she kept trying to maintain the perfect image expected from a future Romano wife. "I was trying to teach staff respect," she said defensively. "Respect?" Vincent repeated quietly. Then he glanced toward Naomi again. "You asked a woman caring for my mother to kneel on the floor in front of strangers." Olivia blinked in surprise. Vincent stepped closer now, his voice remaining calm in the way storms remained calm before breaking cities apart. "Last night, while you were posting rehearsal dinner photos online, Naomi stayed beside my mother for 6 straight hours while she struggled to breathe." A murmur spread instantly across the ballroom. Olivia looked genuinely caught off guard. "I did not know that." "No," Vincent agreed coldly. "You did not bother asking." Naomi immediately lowered her gaze further, clearly uncomfortable being discussed publicly at all. That only made the contrast worse. Olivia wore diamonds worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, while Naomi still stood in stained sleeves, trying not to create problems for anyone else. Vincent slowly bent down and picked up one of the scattered $100 bills from the floor. The ballroom remained frozen around him. He looked at the money for a moment before speaking again. "Do you know what my father taught me before he died?" Nobody answered. Vincent's eyes never left Olivia. "He said the easiest way to judge a person is to watch how they treat someone who cannot fight back." Olivia's confidence finally began cracking beneath the pressure in the room. "Vincent, this is ridiculous. She is a maid." The second the words left her mouth, several people visibly reacted, because Vincent Romano's expression changed instantly, not loudly, not dramatically, somehow worse. His face became completely emotionless. Luca Moretti quietly took one step closer from the edge of the ballroom, already understanding what was coming. Vincent folded the $100 bill carefully between his fingers. "My mother was a maid," he said softly. Olivia froze. so did the room. Very few people outside the Romano family knew that truth. Before Vincent built an empire powerful enough to control half of Chicago's underground economy, Eleanor Romano had cleaned hotel rooms while raising her son alone after his father disappeared for years inside federal prison. Vincent never spoke publicly about those years, ever. Olivia's lips parted slightly. "I did not mean—" "You meant exactly what you said." Vincent's voice remained perfectly controlled, but now it carried something far more dangerous than anger: disappointment. He slowly reached toward his tuxedo pocket, removed the velvet wedding ring box, and stared at it for several long seconds while the ballroom held its breath around him. Then, without taking his eyes off Olivia, Vincent closed the box again. "This wedding," he said quietly, "is over." Nothing exposes a fake queen faster than losing the crown she thought was guaranteed. The silence inside the ballroom became almost unbearable after Vincent Romano spoke the words no one believed they would ever hear. "This wedding is over." For several long seconds, nobody moved at all. The chandeliers continued glowing above crystal tables covered in untouched champagne glasses and melting ice sculptures, while nearly 200 guests stood frozen in disbelief. Olivia Sinclair stared at Vincent as though her mind could not process what had just happened. "You cannot be serious," she whispered finally. Vincent calmly placed the velvet ring box onto the nearest table beside the scattered $100 bills still lying across the marble floor. "I have never been more serious in my life." Olivia laughed suddenly, but the sound cracked halfway through. "You are ending our wedding over a maid." Vincent's expression never changed. "No. I am ending it because I finally saw who you become when someone weaker cannot defend themselves." The words spread through the ballroom like cold smoke. Reporters near the back discreetly lowered their cameras, suddenly realizing they were witnessing something far more explosive than a luxury wedding. Several guests began exchanging nervous whispers. Others avoided eye contact completely. Nobody wanted to stand on the wrong side of Vincent Romano in a moment like this. Olivia's father quickly stepped forward from the VIP table, adjusting his expensive tuxedo with shaking hands. "Vincent," he said carefully, trying to sound diplomatic, "perhaps emotions are high tonight. We can discuss this privately." Vincent looked at him once. "There is nothing private about public humiliation." The older man immediately fell silent. Olivia's face flushed with panic beneath layers of perfect makeup. "You are humiliating me now." Vincent's eyes moved briefly toward Naomi standing quietly near the dessert table. "Now you understand how it feels?" The ballroom air shifted again, heavier this time, because everyone could see it now. Vincent Romano was not defending Naomi out of pity. He was defending a principle, and that frightened people more. Olivia stepped closer desperately, lowering her voice. "Vincent, please, people are watching. They were watching earlier too," he replied calmly. "You simply did not care then." Naomi wished desperately she could disappear. She kept her eyes lowered, while every conversation in the ballroom revolved around her existence. The attention felt unbearable. She never wanted power, never wanted revenge. She only wanted to work honestly and help her mother survive another month. Yet somehow she had become the center of a war between cruelty and dignity. Sophia Romano quietly walked across the ballroom and slipped her small hand into Naomi's. The innocent gesture nearly broke the tension completely. Several women near the front tables visibly softened watching it happen. Olivia noticed too, and jealousy flashed across her face so quickly she could not hide it anymore. "Unbelievable," she snapped bitterly. "You are all acting like she is some saint." Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. "No," he answered quietly. "We are simply acting like she is human." Another painful silence followed. Olivia looked around the ballroom searching for support, but the room had changed sides already. Her bridesmaids avoided her eyes. Guests who had laughed earlier now stared into their champagne glasses with visible discomfort. Even the event staff stood taller somehow, like Vincent had unknowingly defended all of them at once. Then the giant ballroom screens mounted beside the orchestra suddenly flickered to life. Confused murmurs spread instantly through the crowd. Luca Moretti stood near the control station at the back wall with one hand resting calmly beside the monitor system. Olivia turned sharply toward Vincent. "What is this?" Vincent never looked away from her. The truth. Security footage began playing silently across every screen in the ballroom. Olivia insulting servers during rehearsal dinner. Olivia mocking kitchen staff behind closed doors. Olivia laughing while calling employees disposable. Clip after clip after clip. The ballroom watched in complete silence while the carefully constructed image of elegance shattered beneath cold digital light. Olivia's breathing became uneven. "Turn this off," she whispered. Nobody moved, because for the first time all evening, the entire mansion finally saw what Vincent Romano saw. A woman dressed like royalty with absolutely no grace at all. Luxury can buy diamonds, castles, and applause, but it cannot buy character once the truth enters the room. The ballroom screens continued glowing above the silent crowd, while Olivia Sinclair's carefully polished image collapsed frame by frame in front of Chicago's most powerful guests. Every cruel comment, every mocking laugh, every moment she treated workers like furniture instead of human beings. The evidence played without dramatic music or narration, which somehow made it even worse. Cold facts never needed decoration. Olivia stood completely frozen near the center of the ballroom, her face pale beneath layers of flawless makeup. Earlier that evening, she had looked untouchable, like a woman born to stand beside kings. Now she looked small, frightened, exposed. "This is insane," she whispered shakily while looking around the room for support. "You recorded me." Vincent Romano remained calm beside the staircase, one hand resting loosely in his pocket. "No," he answered quietly. "You revealed yourself." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Nobody defended her. Not anymore. The wealthy socialites who had laughed at Naomi earlier suddenly became fascinated by their champagne glasses and untouched desserts. Because deep down, they recognized something terrifying about moments like this. If cruelty could destroy Olivia Sinclair in one night, then perhaps their own masks were not as secure as they once believed either. Olivia's mother hurried toward her daughter with panic written across her face. "Turn those screens off immediately," she hissed toward Luca Moretti. Luca did not even blink. "Mr. Romano did not ask me to." The older woman turned desperately toward Vincent. "This public embarrassment is unnecessary." Vincent slowly looked across the ballroom toward the rows of silent staff members lining the walls. Housekeepers, servers, valets, bartenders. People invisible to most guests only an hour earlier. "Public embarrassment," he repeated softly. Interesting choice of words. Then his eyes returned to Olivia, because nobody seemed concerned about public embarrassment when Naomi was ordered onto the floor. The words struck the room with brutal clarity. Naomi immediately wished she could disappear again. She hated hearing her name repeated in front of strangers, hated being the center of conflict. But as she glanced toward the staff around her, she noticed something unexpected. They were no longer looking at her with pity, they were looking at her with respect. Mrs. Delgado stood near the kitchen entrance with tears shining quietly in her eyes. One of the younger servers gave Naomi the smallest nod imaginable. Even the security guards seemed different somehow. Straighter, more awake. As though one powerful man choosing dignity over cruelty had reminded everyone in the mansion that kindness still mattered. Olivia suddenly laughed bitterly, folding her arms tightly across herself. "So this is what this is really about," she snapped. "You are throwing away our future because some maid made you feel guilty." Vincent's expression hardened instantly. "No," he replied. "I am ending this because a woman who humiliates others for entertainment would eventually destroy everything around her." Olivia's composure cracked completely now. "You are making me look like a monster," Vincent answered without hesitation. "I gave you every opportunity tonight not to become one." The ballroom remained painfully quiet. Outside the towering windows overlooking Lake Michigan, rain had begun falling softly against the glass, turning the city lights blurry and distant beyond the storm. It felt as though the mansion itself had grown colder. Olivia looked around one final time, hoping someone would stand beside her. Nobody did. Not her bridesmaids, not her parents, not the wealthy guests who had praised her beauty all evening, because beauty without grace had become impossible to ignore now. Then something small happened that shattered the last illusion left in the room. Sophia Romano slowly walked away from Olivia and moved quietly toward Naomi instead. The little girl reached up carefully and slipped her tiny hand into Naomi's stained sleeve again. Naomi looked down in surprise. Sophia simply whispered, "You are the nice one." Vincent closed his eyes briefly after hearing those words, because children almost always saw the truth adults tried hardest to hide. People never remember the richest person in the room. They remember the person who showed grace when everyone else chose cruelty. The rain continued falling outside the Romano mansion long after the guests began quietly leaving the ruined wedding reception behind. Luxury cars disappeared one by one into the dark Chicago night, while soaked camera crews packed equipment beneath flashing streetlights. Inside the ballroom, workers silently cleared untouched wedding cakes, wilted flower arrangements, and crystal glasses still half filled with expensive champagne. The celebration that had been designed to dominate social media headlines for weeks had collapsed in less than 20 minutes. And somehow, the quiet afterward felt louder than the scandal itself. Naomi Carter stood alone near the service hallway, changing out of the stained black uniform jacket Mrs. Delgado had lent her earlier. Her injured hand still ached beneath the fresh bandage now wrapped carefully around her palm, but she barely noticed it anymore. Emotional exhaustion weighed far heavier. She folded the jacket gently and placed it on the counter before reaching for her small canvas bag. "You are leaving, Mrs. Delgado asked softly from the doorway. Naomi nodded. "I think it is better." The older woman looked saddened but not surprised. "None of this was your fault." Naomi gave a tired smile. "That does not matter in places like this." She picked up her bag slowly and glanced once toward the ballroom where workers continued cleaning beneath dimmed chandeliers. Earlier that evening, she had felt invisible there, then suddenly too visible. Now she simply felt tired. "My mother always said wealthy people do not like mirrors," Naomi whispered quietly. And tonight one finally stood in front of them. Mrs. Delgado's eyes softened. "You reminded this house of something important." Naomi lowered her gaze modestly. "I never meant to cause trouble. That is why it mattered." Naomi stepped into the long marble hallway leading toward the mansion entrance while rain tapped gently against the towering windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The mansion felt completely different now, quieter, humbled somehow. As she approached the front doors, she noticed several members of the staff standing silently along the hallway walls. Housekeepers, drivers, kitchen workers, security guards. None of them spoke, but one by one, they nodded respectfully as she passed. Naomi looked genuinely confused by it. Then she understood. They were not thanking her for embarrassing Olivia Sinclair. They were thanking her for refusing to surrender her dignity when someone powerful demanded it. Naomi's throat tightened unexpectedly. She quickly looked down again and continued walking toward the entrance. But before she could reach the door, a familiar deep voice stopped her gently behind the silence. "Naomi." She turned slowly. Vincent Romano stood at the far end of the hallway without his tuxedo jacket now. The sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled neatly to his forearms. For the first time all evening, he looked less like the most feared man in Chicago and more like a son exhausted after disappointing himself. Naomi immediately straightened nervously. "Sir, I am sorry for everything that happened tonight." Vincent stared at her for several long seconds, as though the apology itself physically pained him. "You are apologizing again," he said quietly. Naomi lowered her eyes. "I did not want your family hurt because of me." Vincent slowly walked closer beneath the warm hallway lights. "My family was not hurt because of you." His voice remained calm. "It was hurt because I almost invited the wrong person into it." Naomi did not know how to answer that. Rainwater streaked softly across the giant windows beside them, while the mansion remained completely silent around their footsteps. Vincent finally stopped a few feet away from her. "Do you know what I saw tonight?" Naomi shook her head slightly. Vincent's eyes moved briefly toward her injured hand before returning to her face. "I saw a woman everyone thought was powerless walk into a room full of wealthy people and somehow become the only person with real class." Naomi looked stunned by the words. Vincent reached into his pocket and gently placed a small folded envelope into her hand. "For your mother's treatments," he said softly before she could protest. No strings attached. Naomi looked up immediately. "Sir, I cannot." "Yes," Vincent interrupted quietly. "You can." Their eyes met fully for the first time that night. No fear, no humiliation, just understanding, somewhere deeper inside the mansion. Workers continued cleaning the remains of a wedding that never happened. But in that quiet hallway beside the rain-covered windows, something else remained, standing long after the diamonds, flowers, and luxury had failed. Dignity. And that night, inside a mansion built on power, everyone finally remembered what dignity looked like.